19. Yes, if you're just joining, we are reading Psalm 119. Okay. Good Sabbath to everyone. Very nice to see you all out here. Okay. And we read, "Happy are those whose way is blameless, who follow the teaching of Yahweh. Happy are those who observe his decrees, who turn to him wholeheartedly. They have done no wrong, but have followed his ways. You have commanded that your precepts be kept diligently. Would that my ways were firm in keeping your laws. Then I would not be ashamed when I regard all your commandments. I will praise you with a sincere heart as I learn your just rules. I will keep your laws. Do not utterly forsake me. How can a young man keep his way pure? By holding to your word. I have turned to you with all my heart. Do not let me stray from your commandments. In my heart, I treasure your promise. Therefore, I do not sin against you. Blessed are you, O Yahweh. Train me in your laws. With my lips, I rehearse all the rules you proclaimed. I rejoice over the way of your decrees, as over all riches. I study your precepts. I regard your ways. I take delight in your laws. I will not neglect your word. Deal kindly with your servant, that I may live to keep your word. Open my eyes, that I may perceive the wonders of your teaching. I am only a sojourner in the land. Do not hide your commandments from me. My soul is consumed with longing for your rules at all times. You blast the accursed, insolent ones who stray from your commandments. Take away from me taunt and abuse, because I observe your decrees. Though princes meet and speak against me, your servant studies your laws. For your decrees are my delight, my intimate companions. My soul clings to the dust. Revive me in accordance with your word. I have declared my way, and you have answered me. Train me in your laws. Make me understand the way of your precepts, that I may study your wondrous acts. I am racked with grief. Sustain me in accordance with your word. Remove all false ways from me. Favor me with your teaching. I have chosen the way of faithfulness. I have set your rules before me. I cling to your decrees. O Yahweh, do not put me to shame. I eagerly pursue your commandments, for you broaden my understanding. Teach me, O Yahweh, the ways of your laws. I will observe them to the utmost. Give me understanding, that I may observe your teaching and keep it wholeheartedly. Lead me in the path of your commandments, for that is my concern. Turn my heart to your decrees and not to love of gain. Avert my eyes from seeing falsehood. By your ways, preserve me. Fulfill your promise to your servant, which is for those who worship you. Remove the taunt that I dread, for your rules are good. See, I have longed for your precepts. By your righteousness, preserve me. May your steadfast love reach me, O Yahweh, your deliverance, as you have promised. I shall have an answer for those who taunt me, for I have put my trust in your word. Do not utterly take the truth away from my mouth, for I have put my hope in your rules. I will obey your teaching forever and ever. I will walk about at ease, for I have turned to your precepts. I will speak of your decrees and not be ashamed in the presence of kings. I will delight in your commandments, which I love. I reach out for your commandments, which I love. I study your laws. Remember your word to your servant, through which you have given me hope. This is my comfort in my affliction, that your promise has preserved me. Though the arrogant have cruelly mocked me, I have not swerved from your teaching. I remember your rules of old, O Yahweh, and find comfort in them. I'm seized with rage because of the wicked who forsake your teaching. Your laws are a source of strength to me wherever I may dwell. I remember your name at night, O Yahweh, and obey your teaching. This has been my lot, for I have observed your precepts. Yahweh is my portion. I have resolved to keep your words. I have implored you with all my heart. Have mercy on me in accordance with your promise. I've considered my ways and have turned back to your decrees. I have hurried and not delayed to keep your commandments. Though the bonds of the wicked are coiled around me, I have not neglected your teaching. I rise at midnight to praise you for your just rules. I am a companion to all who fear you, to those who keep your precepts. Your steadfast love, O Yahweh, fills the earth. Teach me your laws. You have treated your servant well according to your word, O Yahweh. Teach me good sense and knowledge, for I have put my trust in your commandments. Before I was humbled, I went astray, but now I keep your word. You are good and beneficent. Teach me your laws. Though the arrogant have accused me falsely, I observe your precepts wholeheartedly. Their minds are thick like fat. As for me, your teaching is my delight. It was good for me that I was humbled, so that I might learn your laws. I prefer the teaching you proclaim to thousands of gold and silver pieces. Your hands made me and fashioned me. Give me understanding that I may learn your commandments. Those who fear you will see me and rejoice, for I have put my hope in your word. I know, O Yahweh, that your rulings are just. Rightly have you humbled me. May your steadfast love comfort me in accordance with your promise to your servant. May your mercy reach me that I might live, for your teaching is my delight. Let the insolent be dismayed, for they have wronged me without cause. I will study your precepts. May those who fear you, those who know your decrees, turn again to me. May I wholeheartedly follow your law so that I do not come to grief. I long for your deliverance. I hope for your word. My eyes pine away for your promise. I say, when will you comfort me? Though I have become like a water skin dried in smoke, I have not neglected your laws. How long has your servant to live? When will you bring my persecutors to judgment? The insolent have dug pits for me, flouting your teaching. All your commandments are enduring. I am persecuted without cause. Help me. Though they almost wiped me off the earth, I did not abandon your precepts. As befits your steadfast love, preserve me so that I may keep the decree you proclaimed. Yahweh exists forever. Your word stands firm in heaven. Your faithfulness is for all generations. You have established the earth and it stands. They stand this day to carry out your rulings, for all are your servants. Were not your teaching my delight, I would have perished in my affliction. I will never neglect your precepts, for you have preserved my life through them. I am yours. Save me, for I have turned to your precepts. The wicked hope to destroy me, but I ponder your decrees. I have seen that all things have their limit, but your commandment is broad beyond measure. One thing that I have neglected to do that I meant to do, is, and I'll do it from this point forward, is read the beginning of each section, because this is in segments or strophes. And this is, it's the reason I missed it here is because in this version, it's very tiny. They put it very tiny. It's not big like in your version probably. So this is the MAME section, MAME. How I love your teaching. It is my study all day long. Your commandments make me wiser than my enemies. They always stand by me. I have gained more insight than all my teachers, for your decrees are my study. I'll come back to that verse later, because it doesn't actually say I've gained more insight than all my teachers. A more accurate translation would be that I have gained insight from my teachers. I have gained more understanding than my elders, same business, for I observe your precepts. I don't know why everybody translates it that way. It's not really the sense of what's being conveyed here. It looks like he's being very arrogant. He's not. He's saying, I've gained these insights and this understanding from all my teachers. 101. I have avoided evil every way. Excuse me. I have avoided every evil way so that I may keep your word. I have not departed from your rules, for you have instructed me. How pleasing is your word to my palate, sweeter than honey. I ponder your precepts, therefore I hate every false way. Noon section. Your word is a lamp to my feet, a light for my path. I have firmly sworn to keep your just rules. I am very much afflicted. O Yahweh, preserve me in accordance with your word. Accept, O Yahweh, my free will offerings. Teach me your rules. Though my life is always in danger, I do not neglect your teaching. Though the wicked have set a trap for me, I have not strayed from your precepts. Your decrees are my eternal heritage. They are my heart's delight. I am resolved to follow your laws to the utmost forever. Samech. I hate men of divided heart, but I love your teaching. You are my protection and my shield. I hope for your word. Keep away from me, you evildoers, that I may observe the commandments of my Elohim. Support me as you promise, so that I may live. Do not thwart my expectation. Sustain me that I may be saved, and I will always muse upon your laws. You reject all who stray from your laws, for they are false and deceitful. You do away with the wicked as if they were dross. Rightly do I love your decrees. My flesh creeps from fear of you. I am in awe of your rulings. Ayin. I have done what is just and right. Do not abandon me to those who would wrong me. Guarantee your servant's well-being. Do not let the arrogant wrong me. My eyes pine away for your deliverance, for your promise of victory. Deal with your servant as befits your steadfast love. Teach me your laws. I am your servant. Give me understanding that I might know your decrees. It is a time to act for Yahweh, for they have violated your teaching. Rightly do I love your commandments, more than gold, even fine gold. Truly, by your precepts, I walk straight. I hate every false way. Pay. Your decrees are wondrous. Rightly do I observe them. The words you inscribed give light and grant understanding to the simple. I open my mouth wide. I pant, longing for your commandments. Turn to me and be gracious to me, as is your rule with those who love your name. Make my feet firm through your promise. Do not let iniquity dominate me. Redeem me from being wronged by man, that I may keep your precepts. Show favor to your servant and teach me your laws. My eyes shed streams of water because men do not obey your teaching. Tzadeh. You are righteous, O Yahweh. Your rulings are just. You have ordained righteous decrees. They are firmly enduring. I am consumed with rage over my foes and neglect of your words. Your word is exceedingly pure, and your servant loves it. Though I am belittled and despised, I have not neglected your precepts. Your righteousness is eternal. Your teaching is true. Though anguish and distress come upon me, your commandments are my delight. Your righteous your righteous decrees are eternal. Give me understanding that I might live. Kof. I call with all my heart, answer me, O Yahweh, that I may observe your laws. I call upon you, save me, that I may keep your decrees. I rise before dawn and cry for help. I hope for your word. My eyes greet each watch of the night as I meditate on your promise. Hear my voice as befits your steadfast love. O Yahweh, preserve me as is your rule. Those who pursue intrigue draw near. They are far from your teaching. You, O Yahweh, are near, and all your commandments are true. I know from your decrees of old that you have established them forever. Resh. See my affliction and rescue me, for I have not neglected your teaching. Champion my cause and redeem me, preserve me according to your promise. Deliverance is far from the wicked, for they have not turned to your laws. Your mercies are great, O Yahweh. As is your rule, preserve me. Many are my persecutors and foes. I have not swerved from your decrees. I have seen traitors and loathed them because they did not keep your word in mind. See that I have loved your precepts, O Yahweh. Preserve me as befits your steadfast love. Truth is the essence of your word. Your just rules are eternal. Shin. Princes have persecuted me without reason. My heart thrills at your word. I rejoice over your promise as one who obtains great spoil. I hate and abhor falsehood. I love your teaching. I praise you 7 times each day for your just rules. Those who love your teaching enjoy well-being. They encounter no adversity. I hope for your deliverance, O Yahweh. I observe your commandments. I obey your decrees and love them greatly. I obey your precepts and decrees. All my ways are before you. Tau. May my plea reach you, O Yahweh. Grant me understanding according to your word. May my petition come before you. Save me in accordance with your promise. My lips shall pour forth praise, for you teach me your laws. Excuse me. My tongue shall declare your promise, for all your commandments are just. Lend your hand to help me, for I have chosen your precepts. I have longed for your deliverance, O Yahweh. Your teaching is my delight. Let me live that I may praise you. May your rules be my help. I have strayed like a lost sheep. Search for your servant, for I have not neglected your commandments. I think he really likes the law. I could be wrong, but let me say a few things about Psalm 119. And I know that it can seem somewhat repetitive, but there's deliberation in how this was put together. And of course, I'd be willing to bet anything that for someone who really knows Hebrew very well, that it would be even more, that the structure would seem even more beautiful than we can tell in the English. So I want to just share my screen with you here and just want to point out a few things about the Psalm. And I decided to read this particular Psalm because we don't get to read it often because it's so long, right? So if we do read it in worship, in our devotional period, for example, many of you know when we do our devotions, we always read a Psalm. And when we do so, we don't necessarily read more than a section or two of this particular Psalm, obviously because of its length. So the fact that we can actually read it today without having to, and actually go through the entirety is a breath of fresh air. So you get to see the whole Psalm in its context, which is nice. Can everyone see that screen? Is the Hebrew coming through on that? Okay. Let's see if I can somehow make that just a little bit larger. Let me see if I can do that. Okay. Well, yeah, this is it here. Okay, good. All right, is that a little better? A little larger? Yeah? You mean the print? The print, yeah. Is that a little larger? Okay, good, good. Let me see if I can lower this. Make that larger. Maybe even a bit larger. How's that? Good, okay. So what I'd like to point out here is if you look in your regular Bible, whatever version you have, chances are you'll see various sections. The Psalm is broken down into a number of sections. This Psalm is what is known as an acrostic, A-C-R-O-S-T-I-C. And what it means is essentially that it's a literary device that's used where you use the first letter of a verse in order to point out something in particular for effect. And this particular psalm uses the entire Hebrew alphabet, which is kind of interesting. So the idea is, this psalm was not crafted very, very simply. This was not crafted in 5 minutes. This took time to put this together. This was actually a work of art to get this psalm together, right? And of course, by inspiration of Almighty Yahweh. And when you consider that the word of Yahweh is supposed to be all-encompassing in our lives, and the word of Yahweh is made of words, right? Then you can see some of the idea behind the writer of the psalm. And by the way, we don't really know who wrote this psalm. There's no superscription like there usually is for so many of the psalms. And actually, many of the psalms don't have that superscription. So we assume that most of them were written by David because of many that do say a psalm of David. But there are others from the sons of Korah, and there are others as well. So we don't really know. It's not, the writer of the psalm is not identified. He doesn't identify himself. But the clues of the way in which the psalm is written lead most scholars to believe that it was written after the return from exile, which is significant in terms of the message that the psalm is trying to convey. But getting back to the alphabet, so, it's not coincidental that it's done in an acrostic, because it's meant to emphasize that the word of Yahweh encompasses everything, as we would say in English, from A to Z, right? From Aleph to Tau. It's something that encompasses your entire life from beginning to end. It's your everything, right? It's kind of like what you see in the book of Ecclesiastes that we read last time. And he says at the end to keep the commandments, because this is the whole of man, right? So it's like saying the word of Yahweh is your entirety from A to Z, right? And the way that it works is kind of neat because, let me see if I can get my pointer here. Maybe the spotlight is better here. Let me see if I can get my spotlight. Can you guys see that little spotlight? Okay. So you could see the beginning of every line begins with a letter of the alphabet. This is the letter Aleph in Hebrew, which corresponds in the way we would do in our own English version, and that gets complicated. Right? Not everything corresponds to an exact letter that we know today, for a number of reasons. But just roughly speaking, this corresponds to our A, Aleph, right? Aleph Beit, the alphabet, Aleph Beit, alphabet. This is the Aleph, and you notice that every verse beginning the section or strophe, S-T-R-O-P-H-E, every strophe begins with the letter Aleph, right? And the psalm consists of 176 verses broken down into every letter of the alphabet. There are 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and it's exactly 8 verses per strophe, right? 8 verses per strophe, which I think is kind of interesting because we all know that in biblical numerology, 8 represents a new beginning, right? So, you have section 1 and then you have a new beginning, right? And then you have section 2, et cetera, and so forth. So it's like every little section is emphasizing something in particular. And because this is not a full-blown study, we're not going to go into every section, which is kind of an interesting study in and of itself. But just know that there's more. The point here is that there's much more than meets the eye when you're reading a psalm like this. It's just one psalm, right? But look how much attention goes into it, right? This is when people, this is why I get frustrated when people think that the Bible is boring, and you hear people out there who have no clue about the scriptures, and they talk about how it's a dusty book or whatever, right? They don't have a clue. They don't understand the complexity of this thing and how inspiring it truly is. So when you look at this, right? So Ashrei, right? And this one here, Ashrei, Af, Atah, and it's all through, and it's meant, it's not only the interpretational significance, right? But also for anyone who's memorizing scripture, because in the ancient world, they didn't have television, they didn't have radio, right? A lot of, studious people who would take it upon themselves to learn these things. And some people would actually even memorize them. You might think that's impossible to memorize 176 verses, but it's not impossible if someone really wants to do it. And in Hebrew in particular, tends to be a very economical language. It's not, you can say in maybe, 5 words what it might take you 10 English words to say. That's what I mean when I say there's economy in the language. So to memorize 176 verses would not be impossible, or at least sections of that. And to do it with an acrostic is also a mnemonic device, right? Where you can remember things better. So you see the Aleph section, and then beginning with verse 9, you see Beith, right? That's the Beith. Okay. Ba'ameh, Bechol Levi, Belivi, Baruch, and so forth and so on. Here's Gimel, right? So when you see that section in your English Bible that says Aleph or Beit or what have you, that's the reason why you see that there. Okay, it's because, let me see if I can get another translation in here. Okay, you could tell that I haven't used this program all that much. All right, so let me see. Okay. Will that do it? I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna have to play with, oh, there we go. Okay, here we go. Do you see that? Did it go up? Okay. So when you see that section, from now on, you know the reason why it's an Aleph section and the base section, etc. Okay. All right. There are actually 10 words, and in the Jewish version, you actually see that pretty well. No. Can you guys still see me too? Okay. I can see myself a little. Can I put the spotlight on that and pin it? Does that bring me in or no? Okay, you're still seeing only the screen? Okay, that's fine. I want to show you a few more things in the text. So I'll tell you what, let me stop sharing for now. So you actually have 10 different words in this psalm for that in some translations is translated only as law, right? But you'll see it described differently in a really good translation, right? So you're going to have words for and I won't give you all the Hebrew stuff, but the word, there's a one that's translated as word, right? So it's not just law everywhere, it's word. Some places will be way, your way, right? Some places will say your testimony, your judgment, precept, commandment, law, Torah, law, statutes, chukim, and faithfulness, emunah. All of these are variations of the same thing: your word, your law, your testimony, your way, etc. But it all essentially is pointing to the same thing. It's pointing to Yahweh's word and to his Torah. So it's not just referring to the Torah, right? The 5 books of Moses. It's referring generally to Yahweh's instruction, to Yahweh's teaching, to Yahweh's ways. So there's this constant emphasis on all these aspects of Yahweh's word, and emphasizing how much he loves it and how he wants to be near it and how he wants to internalize it. And who is the person that's being addressed, actually? Well, the person that's being addressed is probably a student, is what we're seeing here. A student who is learning from a teacher. But interestingly, the teacher throughout most of this is the person who's being addressed, right? It's not a rabbi, it's not a prophet, it's Yahweh himself. In other words, Yahweh is presented here as the master teacher, right? So it's always, for the most part, teach me your ways, etc., right? You teach me, you preserve me, etc. He says in verse 9, how can a young person stay on the path of purity? By living according to your word. I seek you with all my heart. Do not let me stray from your commands. Verse 10, right? So the person is personified by a young student, right? By a young man who's a student, and his master teacher is Almighty Yahweh himself. Now, as I said, culturally, and by the way, this is what's known as one of the Torah Psalms, okay? Because you have a few Psalms that elaborate on the Torah. So you might want to write them down. Psalm 1, right? Which is very familiar to us all, right? Which is, happy are those who what? Or blessed. Happy or blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked or stand in the way of sinners, etc., but whose delight is in the law of Yahweh and who meditates on his law day and night. Then you have Psalm 19, and I always remember Psalm 19 pretty easily because I remember 19, 119, right? You learn little mnemonic things like this along the way in your walk with Yahweh, so you could find things easier. So Psalm 19, especially beginning with around verse 7, the law of Yahweh is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of Yahweh are trustworthy, making wise the simple, etc. And then you have Psalm 112. Psalm 112 and 119 together form what is known in the scholarly world as an inclusio, which means that they're like, an inclusio is like bookends. You have one that's elaborating on one aspect of the Torah, and then 119 is ending with another aspect of the Torah, and then everything in between kind of elaborates on that, right? See, it's interesting that we get the impression sometimes, especially listening to the people who say, "Oh, the Bible is an old book and blah blah blah, has no sense," and don't ever listen to that nonsense. It's totally wrong. The Bible is one of the most in its complete composition, and within each individual book is one of the most complex, richly layered, richly textured literary masterpieces of human history. Masterpiece, right? So don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. And we tend to get the impression sometimes that these Psalms are just kind of haphazardly thrown together, and 150 Psalms, just put them in one after the other. It's not even close to the truth. There's structure. You can see even within Psalm 119 itself that there's structure in that Psalm. And the structure is meant to convey certain ideas. The people who put these things together, they weren't nondescripts. These were individuals who Yahweh personally chose to inspire them to write these things. And then he inspired the people later in history who were the teachers and the time and the people of Ezra, for example, the men of the Great Assembly, to compile them and put them together and to decide which ones go in the canon and in what order. There's order and structure in all this, and nothing is put in there just by accident. Someone just said, put their finger to the wind and said, where should I stick this? There's a reason and rationale why everything wound up where it wound up. Believe that. And when you look through the Psalms, did you know that the Psalms are comprised of 5 different major sections, that each one of which is by some type of interpretation, which I won't go into at the moment, tied to each of the books of the Pentateuch, of the 5 books of Moses, right? They're not just there haphazardly, and their structure. And did you know that, for example, between the first couple of Psalms, that Psalm 1, Psalm 2, and Psalm 3, there are connections between them. And then there's a Psalm where there's this aspect that's geared towards Yahweh, and then the very next Psalm is completing that thought. And that's why it was put there. And like I said, I don't have time, regrettably, to go through each one of those things, but there's an absolute order. And when you look at Psalm 119, it was written, as I said, more than likely by someone who came after the exile because of that emphasis on the Torah. Because what happened was, prior to the exile, you had what? You had the tabernacle in the time of Moses, and then you had the temple in the time of Solomon, and then ultimately in the time of later, you had another temple, which would have been after Psalm 119, of course, right? But after the Solomonic temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, right? Then what happens to worship? What happens? It changes radically, right? So you had sacrifices, so you had a sacrificial system where you would come to Almighty Yahweh through sacrifices and through all the rituals that are described in places like Leviticus. And now you no longer have that. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you, to describe in words the impact, the negative impact that the destruction of the temple had on the Jewish people. I mean, when you think about lamentation and you consider what happened with the temple, it was a major blow to the psyche of the Jewish people. And when you look at that concept of coming back from exile, right? It's tied to the Exodus. So you have, and it's all, and it also ties all the way to the Garden of Eden, right? To being exiled from the garden. To have been exiled from the garden is Israel being exiled from the promised land. You understand? Same concept, right? So, and also, you know, being imprisoned in Egypt, being enslaved in Egypt is equivalent to being enslaved under Babylon, for example. And in the present day, that takes on even a newer connotation. So there's these what are called motifs, M-O-T-I-F, right? There's these motifs throughout all of human history with Israel at the center, right? And these ideas of enslavement and of deliverance, of exile and return to the land that we sort of take for granted, and we throw those words around and we kind of like understand them intellectually, but we don't really get them here. We understand them here in our mind, sort of, if we study them, right? But we don't really understand the impact of that in our hearts. And we need to, because ultimately what I'm getting at is the entire story culminates in Yahshua coming to the earth, being crucified, being raised from the dead, and thereby ending an exile, which is what the people were waiting for. But they were waiting for it in a way in which it didn't come. So unless you understand and have the full impact of that, you can't appreciate fully even what Yahshua did, especially what Yahshua did and what it meant to the people of his time, and what by consequence it should mean for us today as well. So when you look at something like Psalm 119, it's going to help you to understand those concepts, those ideas. So Psalm 119, I love your law. I need to be, you know, he's constantly talking about, you know, his longing for the law and to be near to Almighty Yahweh. Because what happened after the exile, the keeping of the Torah became the substitute for the sacrifices, right? Because ultimately that's what the Torah and the keeping of the Torah represents. It represents a giving yourself completely and entirely to Almighty Yahweh, right? So the concept of the Torah, you know, being the center of worship, right? It's in other words, the Torah is now inside you, right? Where does he say? He says in Psalm 119, verse 11, he says, I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. I have hidden your word. That's kind of like, it's one, I've told you before that when we study methodical Bible study, that one of the ways that you study it is by taking a passage of scripture and then finding what you could call a key center. So if you look at the book of Ruth, for example, which is 4 chapters long, for me, the key center of Ruth, and for many people that I've actually talked to who I've looked at their analysis of it, they agree with that. And not everyone will, right? People choose different things. But for me, the key center of the book of Ruth is a verse where they say to Ruth, Boaz says to Ruth, you are a worthy woman. That's a key center. Like everything else hangs around that, right? And in different sections of scripture, you could find a key center, a key central idea. This is a central idea within Psalm 119. I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. And what is this hiding the word in the heart? You've hidden it in your heart so that it serves as a safeguard from doing evil, right? Because if it's in your heart, if it's embedded in your heart, if it's hidden, it's protected. And if it's protected, it's also protecting you. It's keeping you. So when you go to sin, you remember the law because it's not far from you. It's near you. It's within your heart, you see. And this is what we all want. We want to be so embedded in Yahweh's word, and Yahweh's word embedded in our hearts, that we want to have that level of intimacy. You know, I had the privilege of worshiping with Elder Simmons today, Elder Mike Simmons, over in St. Thomas, and he and Josiah Loy presented a very nice message which talked about about intimacy with Yahweh, and he described the necessity to be authentic and to have that genuine connection with Almighty Yahweh. This is what we're talking about, right? I've hidden your word in my heart so that I could be authentic, right? That should be the most authentic part of us, because the heart is representative. It's kind of like the seat of emotion and of all thought, right? That's what Proverbs 23. Wow, I thought I had this memorized. 23:2, is it? Oh, 4:23. I knew 23 was in there somewhere, right? It's like Tevye. Somewhere in the Bible, somewhere in there is something about a chicken. Okay, Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Guard your heart. This is what we're talking about here. I've hidden your word in my heart, right? Why? Hidden your word in your heart, because if it's hidden in there, it protects you, it guards you. You always have it near. It's always near you, right? And that's the kind of intimacy that we want with Yahweh. But there's another thing at work here. If it's hidden, no one can ever take it away from you. It's not like the tabernacle that was destroyed, right? Or not that was destroyed, but just kind of, for whatever reason, just didn't exist anymore, right? The temple, both of them, the physical temples were destroyed. The one in 586 by the Babylonians, which is just prior to this psalm being written, and then the next one by the Romans in 70 Common Era, right? But so they could take away the temple, the tabernacle can you know, that can fall by the wayside. The temple can be destroyed by enemies, and you notice throughout the entire psalm there's this back and forth between, you know, the people who love Yahweh's Torah and then the enemies who are constantly trying to shame them and mock them, right? Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like anything we go through in our world today, where people are constantly vilifying the Bible and vilifying anyone who believes in it, and the way that they consider how we think, and they think we're antiquated, and you know, and on the wrong side, the way they think on the wrong side of history, whatever, right? Okay, you can think whatever you want, but what this says is that what we have is a treasure, and no one can ever take it away from you. They can rant and rave, and they can, you know, go on social media and say all kinds of evil against us, whatever, but they will never be able to take this word away from us, because it does not lie in buildings. It does not lie in makeshift tabernacles in the wilderness. It resides hidden in our hearts, right? So there's much more that I could say about Psalm 119. But I just wanted to, in the time that we have, point out a few structural things to you in terms of the poetry that's described here, and describe a little bit about the message. Let me just, if you bear with me, just a couple quick little things too. I mentioned that I would come back to verse 99. So verse 99, I have more insight than all my teachers, for I meditate on your statutes. That one always kind of threw me. And I have more understanding than the elders, for I obey your precepts. I mean, you could, in one sense, you could look at that as like the student surpasses the teacher, because the student loves the word so much that they're not content with what the teacher tells them, right? They want to take it to the next level. So the teacher gave them a great foundation. It's not a criticism against the teacher. It's not a criticism against the elders, but it's like they took me to a certain point, and I loved it so much that I took it to the next level, right? It could be, you could do that, but in no way is the person saying I'm better than my teachers, right? Which is kind of how it reads. That's why I don't like the translation. But in actuality, the part of the thing is translational, that the preposition that's used there is a preposition that could be translated as from. So I would probably prefer to translate that something like, I have more insight gained from my teachers. I have more understanding from my elders, right? But either way, either interpretation will work well. There are other things as well. I mentioned the strophes and the way in which the structure is, and I hope I'm pronouncing that word right. I think it's strophe and not strophe, right? Anybody know about literature? I think it's strophe. But in any event, if you look at the section, the wow section, so I showed you like different words, like for Aleph and Beit, right? Baruch, whatever it may be. If you look at the wow section, which is strophe 6, which begins with verse 41. Wow. May your unfailing love come to me, Yahweh, your salvation, according to your promise. Then I can answer anyone who taunts me, etc. Never take your word of truth in my mouth, verse 44. I will always obey your law. This is an example of how you don't see this in the English. Let me share my screen with you. And if you go down to verse 41 and look at the wow section, so this is what a wow looks like. Okay, it's the third letter of the Tetragrammaton, the third letter of Yahweh's name, right? When Yahweh, that's the W. But it's interesting. What is this here? So everything here, unlike the other sections that actually showed, for the most part, different words, the way that they do the wow here is using it as part of the construct with the verb, the word, the conjunction and this and that and this. You don't see that in the English, right? And may your unfailing love come to me, because it would read kind of weird, right? So they don't translate it like that in more modern day versions like the NIV. I'd have to check to see some of the older ones like King James or whatever, but I don't know for sure. But that's what's being used here, and this and that and that. And the reason for that, mainly, just interestingly here, is because there aren't a whole lot of words in the Hebrew that start with the letter wow. So that's just kind of more of a practical thing there. So I just wanted to point that out. But also, not only that, right? As a matter of fact, one Hebrew commentator believes that there are only 13 entries in the biblical Hebrew lexicon that begin with the letter wow. So that's one reason, a practical reason. But the previous strophe, which is the Hay section, right, ends with the psalmist longing for Yahweh's precepts. That's verse 40, right, which says, how I long for your precepts, in your righteousness preserve my life. And then strophe 6 is essentially an elongated expression of that longing. And may your unfailing love come to me, and may this, and may that. It's expressing longing. So it's kind of like a more of an emotional, like an emoting of what is described in at the end of the last strophe. And that's according to, and I always like to give credit where credit is due, C. Hassel Bullock, who wrote this commentary on Psalms. So there are other neat little things like that we can go through. Like I said, I'm just touching the surface. This is the beauty of the word of Yahweh, right? That you can take one Psalm, 176 verses, one Psalm, and you could spend a day, right? And that's just, you can go as much as deeply as you want, but you can spend a day easily studying just that one Psalm, right? Okay, so that's all I'm going to cover today. Like I said, there are more things I can point out, but I want to leave a couple of minutes. We started around 3:40 or so, so we have about 10 minutes. So we can stop recording and we'll leave it at that. So I'm going to stop.